Hello Year 10. This is the second lesson in the new booklet B1.4 on the circulatory system in humans. This lesson is going to be regarding the dissection of the heart, which unfortunately you will not be able to do in school this year. However, if you do wish to dissect a heart at home, we do have some videos to show you exactly how to do that and me to talk you through it, as well as a video of a scientist dissecting an ox's heart for you, which is particularly large, and it will enable you to see exactly what you would see in a demonstration in school. So in your booklet, I need you to turn to page 8. I know that we've missed pages 3 to 7. We do that in the third lesson. I prefer you to see the dissected heart first before starting to identify the different parts of the heart, because I prefer you to see it in a real heart first and then the simplified diagrams. So page 8 in your book, and our objective today is to be able to dissect and identify and name the chambers of the heart, what we call the rooms, the blood vessels of the heart, and the valves of the heart. So on page 8, your booklet should look like this, so you need to turn it sideways. You may have done some work about the heart in Key Stage 3, so certainly when we did OG, the oxygen molecule, in Year 8, you may very well have seen your teacher who took you at Key Stage 3 dissect a heart for you to demonstrate. You may have even been lucky enough to work in a group and dissect a heart together, or you may have even seen this done in primary school, Key thing, the target, is to work safely and make careful observations. So it's all about the experience of dissecting the heart is to make observations and actually be able to identify structures. To particularly find the coronary arteries that supply the heart muscle with blood and the chambers and valves of the heart. And to also be able to work out the direction of blood flow through the heart. So what would you need to dissect a heart? Well, obviously a heart, a dissecting board it says here, however a wooden board, a chopping board is fine. They're better than glass chopping tiles that you might have at home in the house because there's a little bit more friction and your heart isn't going to go slipping across the surface. So please be careful. Some either dissecting scissors or sharp scissors at home. I'm afraid the plastic children's variety will not cut this. If you are using a knife, please be very careful, and all incisions always need to be made away from you. If you can see in this diagram down here, they're cutting away from them. If you're using a knife or a sharp pair of scissors, cut away from you, never towards you, It says strings or strips of heavy black polythene, To be perfectly honest, bits of string, bits of wool, bits of thread are equally fine, or a straw, or even something sharp and pointy like some kind of skewer that you might use for barbecues in the summer, just so that you can place it through the blood vessels and see the route that the blood takes. That's what that is for. Now it says disposable gloves. You are handling a piece of meat, so as long as you're sensible, you wash your hands beforehand, wash your hands afterwards, and make sure you scrub, particularly underneath your fingernails. You don't actually need to wear gloves for dissection. It's really only if you've got cuts on your hands and we don't want the blood from the raw meat to contaminate your blood, that's the only time we would recommend wearing gloves. Disinfectant is for cleaning the board down afterwards, but equally a surface spray at home, an anti-bac spray, a cleaner that you use for cleaning your kitchen will work just as well. Just make sure you give that board a good old scrub and some hot soapy water, to clean it afterwards before using it for any further food preparation. And if you have separate boards for chopping vegetables and meat on, use the board that you would chop meat on, and soap and water is for your hands. Big safety thing here, as I've already said, make sure when using scissors or a knife that you do not cut yourself by mistake. Always cut away from yourself, Try not to hack small, gentle movements, of the knife. In actual fact, a blunt knife is more dangerous than a sharper knife, I know a sharper knife, you're more likely to cut yourself, but a blunt knife, okay, tends to not go through the meat as easily, okay, and so that's when the knife may slip, okay, and you end up cutting yourself. If you are going to do this, then please ask an adult if it's okay to do it, okay, in the house. And you can get your hearts from Tesco's, Morrison's, I'm sure there's other good retailers, or even a butcher if you've got a local butcher. If you have a butcher, he may very well leave on for you these blood vessels that we can see on the top of this diagram of this heart, and I'll show you photos of real hearts so you can see them a little bit easier in those. But most supermarkets actually cut this off because it's quite chewy and gristly, and it's not what people want to eat. So people buy hearts to eat, to cook with, okay? Most people these days tend to buy it perhaps for their animals, but it's a cheap source of protein. People would stuff the heart with things like rice and vegetables and cook them in the oven, and it would be a meal in itself with the vegetables and with the meat. So it says put the heart on the board. I would always spin this board round and have the heart pointing away from me. So if you imagine the heart as being a little bit heart-shaped, so this is the top, yeah, and this is the pointy bit, put it so that the pointy part of the heart, this part of the heart, is pointing away from you, okay? The first thing I want you to do is to look at the blood vessels on the surface of the heart, and you should be able to identify really thick blood vessels, sometimes covered with like a creamy fat, and branching off, getting thinner and thinner towards the end. These are what we call the coronary arteries, and they are very, very important because they deliver blood to the heart muscle itself. The heart muscle needs blood delivered to it, okay, because the blood will be carrying oxygen and glucose, and the cells of the muscle of the heart itself, the meat here, would then carry out respiration. This in turn would release energy. So you learnt about this in that unit on the lungs and the heart. And this energy would allow the muscle cells to contract and relax, allowing the heart to squeeze. So this is like a muscle, but it's different to the muscle that's in your arms and legs because this muscle never gets tired. If it does, you're in big trouble. So these cells would be constantly working together as tissue, as muscle tissue, contracting and relaxing, okay, to squeeze, first of all, the bottom of the heart, what we call the ventricles, and then to squeeze the top. And you get this ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum sound, okay, or lud-dub sound. The lud-dub is from inside the heart. There are some valves that open and close to separate the two rooms, okay, the upper room and the lower room from the heart, okay, what we call the atria and the ventricles, the top and the bottom chambers, okay. So that's what this is for. So if your heart has got lots of fat on it, which you'll see in the next picture, okay, then that may prevent the coronary arteries delivering enough oxygen and glucose to the heart muscle to actually carry out respiration and release energy. If this gets blocked, the coronary artery, because of all the fat, and it can't deliver the oxygen and glucose, it can lead to what we call heart attack. So, in this image, the picture on the left would be the kind of heart that you might pick up from a butcher's, okay, because they've left the blood vessels on. If they know it's for dissection, they won't chop those off for you so you can see them. Notice the creamy white fat. You should be able to spot the coronary arteries going over the surface, and they normally have fat around them, near them, okay. We call this little thing on the top of the heart, this is the thymus gland, okay, which you don't need to know about at GCSE, okay. And as we said, these thick, white, creamy blood vessels, okay, they have to withstand very high pressure. These are the arteries. And the looser holes, it's probably hidden behind the thymus gland there, they would be the veins. So arteries take blood away from the heart, veins deliver blood to the heart or inside the heart. On our supermarket heart that's here, we can see these thick creamy arteries have been chopped off. This would be the location of one of them, and this would be the location of the other one, okay? So these are the arteries, okay? We can also see the coronary artery going across the surface there and the creamy white fat, and it looks like the thymus gland is on the back of this particular heart, okay? So don't forget that coronary artery, its job is to deliver blood that is rich in oxygen and glucose, so that the heart muscle can carry out respiration and release energy. Remember, do not say make energy. You cannot make energy. Release energy by respiration to allow the muscle tissue and the muscle cells, okay, to contract and relax. Okay, so that's why the significance of this coronary artery is so important, okay, to keep your heart working. It's not just the arteries and the veins that come into the top of the heart. Just a different view so you can see the difference between arteries and veins. This is our really, really thick wall, okay, of our artery. And this person has got a straw here, which they would put to down the holes of the artery, okay, so that we can see the different sides. These would be our veins here. Arteries tend to have more rounded shape, veins more squashed. So I'm just going to label these V, and these are A arteries. Okay, it looks like a little face. And on this heart, just by looking at this, having dissected quite a number of hearts myself in the past, we can see our thymus gland there, okay. I would say that this side has the thicker wall. So this would be your left, okay, part of the heart. Let's actually put the left on this side, and this would be the right side of the heart. So I would personally turn that heart round through 90 degrees. So my left was actually on my left hand, and the right was on the right hand to make the incisions, okay. So trying to figure out which is the left and the right side, okay, involves you taking your thumbs and imagine putting them down through these big, actually through the arteries here rather than through the veins, okay, putting them down through the arteries here and feeling the thickness of the wall. And I'm imagining that this wall, okay, should be much, much thicker than the other wall. The left artery, okay, is thicker, or has a thicker wall going down into the heart. So to show you how to cut it open, this person is doing exactly what I said you shouldn't do. This person has got the scalpel coming towards them. Always cut away. So you can see the coronary artery, you can see the thymus gland at the top here, okay? But I would cut in that direction, and then on this side, okay, I would cut in that direction from the bottom up to the top. You find that the meat is easier to cut through. When you get to the fat, this is when it can be a bit tricky to try and cut it open. As long as you have two sides, okay, cut, then you should be able to either split it open fully in half like this, or you may have it still attached at the bottom or attached at the top so you can see inside. Now, the way this heart has been cut open, okay, we can see some of the chambers, the rooms in the heart, but it's not easy to see our blood vessels anymore because the heart is split into two sides. So if you can imagine your heart as being a little bit like a house with 4 rooms, 2 upstairs rooms, 2 downstairs rooms, okay? We call these upstairs rooms the atria. One on its own is called an atrium. And we call the downstairs rooms the ventricles. Now, on this heart, we've got the left-hand side is on our right here. So this would be the left atria, LA, and this would be the left ventricle, LV. So we've got here at the top is our left atrium, and here at the bottom is our left ventricle. And because it's cut in half, we can see the other part of the left ventricle here. Notice how thick this wall is on the left-hand side. It's a really thick, powerful muscle because this side of the heart has got to be able to pump the blood out through the aorta, the main artery, up to the head against gravity, and down to your fingers and your toes to deliver blood containing lots of oxygen. And where that hole is there, that would have been our vein coming in. So we would have our what we call pulmonary vein, bringing oxygenated blood into the left atrium, down into the left ventricle, and out of the heart through the aorta, okay, to go to the head and body. So this is our artery, this is our vein. Veins come in, arteries go away. There's also between the rooms, the top and the bottom, the atria and the ventricle, you should be able to see this fleshy flap here. This is called a valve. Apologies, there's my dog snoring in the background, okay? So this is the valve here, and it's held on to the sides of the wall of the heart by what we call the heart strings or tendons. I'm going to rub some of that out so you can see them a little bit clearer. So there's our valve, and there's our heart strings, tendons holding it down. So I want you to imagine on this side of the heart then, we've got oxygenated blood coming from our lungs, where it's picked up the oxygen, through the pulmonary vein, into the top room, the left atrium. This room is sealed off from the bottom one. This valve would be pulled tight across here so that the blood would fill this chamber, this top atrium. Then what would happen is our heart would squeeze, the valve would open like it is in the image, and blood would rush into this left ventricle, yeah? So now the blood has left here, it's filling up here, this valve would close behind it again, this ventricle would squeeze and it would force the blood out of the heart through the aorta, okay, to go off to the head and body at very, very high pressure, okay? So while this is happening on the left-hand side, blood coming in, into the atria, through the valve, into the ventricle, and out through the artery, the aorta, the same thing is happening on the right-hand side. Now, remember we said the right ventricle is much, much thinner. You can see here's the wall. That's how thick it is on the left. This is how thick it is on the right. Not very thick at all. And the reason for that is because the right side has only got to pump the blood literally next door to the lungs to go and pick up oxygen. So whereas the left side has got to get this blood out of the heart, up against gravity to your head and to your feet and your toes and your fingers, okay, this side has only got to get it to the lungs, the right side. So we should have a right atrium, which it's difficult to see. I would imagine it's probably hiding behind the back of this aorta here, and the right ventricle down here. Between them, there would be a valve, okay? So you can just about make out the heart strings there. The valve would be up there. And so the blood would come into the right atria through a vein called the vena cava. And again, it's not easy to see this on this diagram because I think it's tucked behind here somewhere, okay? Into the right atria, through the valve, into the right ventricle, and then it's going to leave the heart, okay, by a main artery, okay, and this artery again is hidden. It's going to be hiding behind here, probably connected, actually attached to this aorta on the other side. It's called the pulmonary artery. So you will see this a little bit clearer on the diagrams when we label them. But it's to have an idea about what the difference is looks-wise between an artery and a vein. And they are quite thick and they've got this generally a circular shape to them. Now, the other thing I want to point out on this cross-section here through this heart is this bit in the middle. This bit in the middle separates the right ventricle from the left ventricle, and it's a big wall. It stops the blood mixing from the left side and the right side. Now, occasionally when babies are born, if they're born a little bit early, what we call premature, then sometimes the body organs haven't had a chance to develop as they should do. And so you can have babies that are born with what we call a hole in the heart. Now, a hole in the heart is not a hole from the outside through this part of the heart. The hole in the heart would be in this middle part of the muscle, but separating the left and the right sides. We call this part the septum. Don't worry about interventricular, okay? And the septum does a really important job because it keeps the blood on the left, which is oxygenated because it's come from the lungs. In other words, it's got lots of oxygen, separate from the blood on the right, which is deoxygenated. And this deoxygenated blood has very little oxygen. It's going to be pumped off to the lungs by the pulmonary artery to go and pick up some more oxygen, ready to do another circuit. So if we have some of this deoxygenated blood trickling through into this side, it means that this blood that's going to go off to the head and body has got a little less oxygen than it should have. So babies who are born with hole in the heart tend to be more tired, okay, because they're not getting as much oxygen to all the body cells, okay, to be able to carry out respiration, release that energy to help them grow and help them repair that hole. Most holes in the heart, okay, in babies will eventually heal up. Occasionally, babies have to have surgery, especially if it's a little bit more complicated and the hole is significantly larger and doesn't seem to be healing. So, hopefully you've noticed that there are two chambers on each side, okay, and there's two top chambers, the atria, and then two lower chambers, the ventricles. Ventricles tend to be much larger. The atria are not so easy to see, particularly on the supermarket hearts, because quite often they've been cut into. Find the one-way valves and the tendons that hold them, okay? Thread pieces of string through the blood vessels, so you can go from, if I go back here, from the pulmonary vein through the aorta, so that's one route on our left side, and through the vena cava, which we can't see because it's hidden on this side, okay, into the right atria, the right ventricle, and out through the pulmonary artery. So showing you the route. So make sure that afterwards you wipe down your board that you've used and you wash your hands thoroughly. And I've just got 4 questions here, A, B, C and D, okay, to see if you can answer. Why is the left ventricle wall much thicker than the right? Which set of valves closes when the ventricles contract, okay? Which set of valves close when the ventricles relax? And why are there sometimes large deposits of fat on the surface? Do you think it matters? Pause the video, see if you can answer those questions. They are on page 9. And then I will go over the answers. So, question A. Why is the left ventricle wall much thicker than the right? The left has to be thicker because it needs to be a more powerful pump to move the blood against gravity to the head and body, whereas your right hand side only needs to be able to pump it next door to the lungs, okay? So which set of valves closes when the ventricles contract? If I just go back, okay, to our heart, when this ventricle contracts, okay, it's these valves between the atria and ventricles that close, okay? So as they squeeze, this valve opens, okay, in the artery, and blood is able to flow out, okay? Which set of valves closes when the ventricles relax, okay? Well, we go back, it would be this valve would open and this valve would close. Now we call these valves, okay, we've got the bicuspid and the tricuspid valves. So the tricuspid valves are on the right of the heart, so in the right ventricle, okay, and the bicuspid are on the left, between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And these valves that are in the arteries, both the pulmonary and the aorta, okay, are what we call the semilunar valves. So the set of valves that closes when the ventricles relax, okay, is when the ventricles contract, right, that's going to be our bicuspid and tricuspid valves. And when the ventricles relax, that's going to be our semilunar valves. And you'll see this when we label our diagrams. So please don't panic about all these new words that you're learning. Sometimes there are large deposits of fat on the surface. Okay, do you think the fat matters? Yes. Too much can block the coronary arteries, and that can lead to a heart attack. Okay, so very, very important that we don't have too much fat in our diet. So hopefully you've now watched the ox dissection, the ox heart dissection, and you've either seen the lamb's heart dissection, okay, that you've done, okay, or you remember it from year 8. I'll see if I can put a lamb's heart dissection video on to Moodle as well, so you've got the two to compare. Dissections are a really good way of understanding how organs work, and the first doctors would have carried out dissections of the human body to figure out how it worked, okay, and why sometimes people got ill and died. No animal is treated cruelly in obtaining the hearts that you may have used for heart dissection. They would all have been removed from the animal when it was slaughtered for meat, okay? So the heart in front of you probably looks a lot different to the one in the diagram on the right. First of all, I want you to draw a pencil sketch of what, if you're dissecting a heart, your heart looks like, labelling any parts you can identify, or you can draw a diagram of this one here. So if I rub it out, okay, you can pause the video and you can see if you can draw out your heart, either the one on the left or the one on the right, okay, labeling up the different parts, okay, and you can always pause the video and rewind if you're not sure the different parts of the heart. So pause the video to draw the outside. So we've then got some questions, okay? So what I would like you to do is we've got, first of all, questions 1 to 9 here, okay? And then it goes on to question 12. I want you to have a go at answering those questions yourself first, and then I will go over them. So pause the video. We're on pages 10, 11, and 12, okay? And see if you can answer these questions. So question 1, how do you know which blood vessel is the aorta? Well, first of all, it's got a very thick wall. And when you place your finger and your thumb inside the aorta, okay, you'll be able to feel, okay, that the left side of the heart has got a very thick wall too. So this left side of the heart has to be the far more powerful pump to get the blood against gravity up to the head and down to the legs. The function of the blood vessels that run over the surface of the heart, they are the coronary arteries, and their job is to deliver blood that's rich in oxygen and glucose so that the heart muscle cells can respire, release energy, and contract and relax. That's what keeps the heart pumping, okay? What is the white material around the tops of the ventricles? That's fat. When you cut the heart in half, exposing the inside, there should be 4 chambers. What are they called? The 2 upper chambers are called the atria. One on their own singular is called an atrium, and the 2 lower chambers are called ventricles. There's a notable difference in the thickness between the walls of the atria and the ventricles. Which are thicker, and why is there this difference? Okay, so the ventricles tend to be thicker as they pump or push the blood out of the heart. Okay. There's also a difference in the thickness between the walls of the two ventricles, left and right. Why is this so? So the left is thicker to pump blood against gravity up to the head and down to the arms and legs, and the feet and the toes. Why do some blood vessels, the arteries, have thick walls and some veins have thin walls? Okay, arteries have to withstand blood at high pressure. Have to withstand blood at high pressure. So that's why they have such thick walls, because otherwise they would burst, okay? Whereas veins have much lower pressure. Now that's a problem in a vein, because sometimes the pressure is so low the blood tries to go the opposite direction to where it should do, tries to go back on itself. So they have valves, okay? Veins have valves to prevent this happening. Question 9, how do you think the flaps of tissue, the valves between the atria and the ventricles work? Okay, they hold the blood back to allow the heart to fill with blood before squeezing and pushing the blood along. So it's really to help maintain this pressure in the heart and this pump, okay? So question 10 now. What is the function of the cords that attach the valve edges to the wards, to the ventricle ward? So we called these the heartstrings or tendons, okay? And their job is to hold the valve in place, and they have to be pretty strong. So if you did dissect the heart and you had a go at trying to cut these, you really have got to cut quite hard to get the heartstrings to cut. And they prevent the valve trying to turn itself, I suppose, inside out as well. Which way do you think the blood flows through the heart? Show the movement of blood on the diagram. Show oxygenated blood in red and deoxygenated in blue. So, this is where we start to look at the diagram here. We've got two pulmonary veins. These have come from the lungs. So because they've come from the lungs, they have blood containing lots of oxygen. Here's our left atrium. Here's our bicuspid valve. Here's our left ventricle. Here are our tendons, our heartstrings. And here is our semilunar valves. And here is our big aorta that's going to take our blood at high pressure off to all those different places it needs to go. The head, the arms, the torso. You can see it's all leaving that way. So all of the left side of the heart contains blood that is oxygenated. So then that's why we've shown the oxygenated blood in red. So you might want to highlight that so you can see. Why are there two pulmonary veins? Well, you have two lungs, a left and right lung, okay? So I'm now going to swap my pen to blue. Once that oxygenated blood has been delivered to wherever it needs to, okay, it's now going to come back to the heart, into the right side of the heart. So we've got two blood vessels coming in here that are deoxygenated, carrying deoxygenated blood, and we call these the vena cava. These are the veins. They come into the right atria, down through the tricuspid valve, through the tendons, into the right ventricle, RV, through the semilunar valves, so these are the semilunar valves here. And this deoxygenated blood needs to go to the lungs, and it goes to the lungs in the pulmonary artery. So why are there two pulmonary arteries? Just the same as pulmonary veins. They need to go to the left and the right lung. Now, one way to help you remember these blood vessels, both the pulmonary vein and the pulmonary artery, this word pulmonary is anything to do with the lungs, okay? So if you hear that word pulmonary, okay, it means it's to do with the lungs. So pulmonary artery, remember arteries always travel away from the heart, and veins always go into the heart. So pulmonary vein has come from the lungs into the heart, pulmonary artery away from the heart going to the lungs. And this is all deoxygenated blood on the right hand side. One thing I forgot to mention, okay, on here, this would also be, we would have our vena cava would be bringing in deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body and the upper part. And if I swap back to red, we would also have our aorta would be taking our oxygenated blood back down, okay, to the lower parts of the body as well, okay. So sometimes you hear these parts of the vena cava, let's go back to blue, called the inferior and superior, okay. Now that word inferior means lower, yeah. So it's coming from the lower part of your body, the inferior vena cava. Superior, much better, higher up, yeah. Superior vena cava is bringing that deoxygenated blood back down from the head, okay. Why does the heart pump twice during each beat? Well, you get, first of all, the atria contract. They push the blood into the ventricle, and then you get the ventricle contract, and that pushes the blood out of the heart. So you get a beating of the two atria simultaneously, left and right, squeezing the blood down into the bottom chamber. The bottom chamber then squeezing the ventricles, okay, to pump the blood out of the heart. What sound does this make? You get this lub-dub sound, and people think it's the sound of the heart actually squeezing, but the lub-dub sound actually comes from the valves opening. So you get lub as they open, dub as they close, lub as they open, dub as they close. So you've got your bicuspid and your tricuspid valves letting the blood go from the atria into the ventricle, and then your semilunar valves are opening to allow the blood from the ventricle to be pushed at force, okay, out of the heart. So pause the video if you need to check your answers and check that you've got the corrections. And the last bit of work that I've got here, I've got to say, I don't think this works anymore because it requires Flash Player, and unfortunately Flash Player is not functioning anymore. It's been removed. But this is all about the first human heart transplant, so read a little bit about information about it. And there did used to be a really nice little activity where you could go online and actually pretend to be a heart surgeon and carry out a heart transplant. So it would take you through it step by step. It was an animation, just like a cartoon game kind of thing, okay, to try and keep the heart patient alive whilst you were carrying out heart transplant. Thank you, Year 10.